I've been doing barbecue for about 50 years. I started I was 10, 12 years old. We had a dude ranch and we used to have our food catered. And we thought, why don't we try this? And so we started doing our own food for 20 people, then 40, then 80, then 160, and we got up to about 10,000. My name is Trace Arnold, and I am the Rib Whisperer. So at the ranch, we'd have 1,000 people, like I mentioned, every day, Saturday and Sunday, 1,000 Saturday, 1,000 Sunday, April through October. And September and October was 10,000, 15,000, which led in to, we needed more smoker capacity. And I thought, we'd just build one. And so that's where Texas Lil's world's largest transportable smoker was born. So the smoker was 57 feet, 7 inches long. It had 10 doors down each side of it, and it would do 7,000 pounds of brisket at one time. There was a big flood in North Dakota, and we'd never really crossed the country with it yet. It was our first time, and we ended up 3 weeks after the flood happened going to North Dakota and feeding 7,000 flood victims at one time. That was probably the beginning of the feeling you get from feeding people. And then in 2001, it was 9/11. We had about $500,000 in cancellations the first week. That didn't change for a year. It just really put a hit on our business. But I had a wife, a kid, and a house, and one on the way. And I had to make a decision. And so the only thing I owned was the smoker. So I opted to just take the smoker and start a business with it. But I knew what I had was a good idea, but not everybody had a need for 7,000 pounds of anything. And so I said, if I could convert this into a smoker and a grill, I'd have it going on. So I knew to create a grill, what I did was I welded all 10 doors closed, cut it in half again, and I made the back go up and down on hydraulic cylinders. And in there I built the grill, which was 5 feet deep, 10 feet wide. They would do 1,000 hot dogs, 500 hamburgers, or 200 16-ounce ribeyes at one time. And we converted it, took off running. There's a big concert in Dallas at South Fork Ranch called KLTY Concert. But I really didn't have the money, so I had to borrow $25,000 from my banker for food. And if it it's a no-brainer to break even. Absolutely no-brainer. And I just tell you, I lost $25,000. I'm out there on my knees at midnight with my wife, looking up at the sky and said, God, why me? What did I do? Am I being punished? But fortunately, the next day when we woke up, there was a Mrs. Baird's sales rep out there. He said, you know what? I'm going to give this to our marketing department. I don't know if it'll help, but I'm going to tell them about it. I wish you would. Appreciate you. And sure enough, about a week or so later, Mrs. Baird's marketing department called me. We ended up working for Mrs. Baird for about 8 years. There was a guy who went to SMU who had heard about the Ultimate Smoker and Grill, but he graduated and he was working for a company in New York called CEG, which they were contracted by the History Channel. And he flew down here to Texas, and we sat in the kitchen back there and had some barbecue and ribs and talked about a plan. And so we orchestrated what would be 1 year going from Texas to New York to California and back in 90 days. And it was called the History Cross Country Cookout Tour. That ended up parlaying into 3 years, 2012, 13, and 14. That's when there was a big explosion in West. And we decided let's go feed the people. And we had a lady that came up and she said, hey, do you mind if we take food to the hospital? Because the doctors, nobody's thought about the hospital. I said, absolutely. So we ended up giving her meals for her husband and all the doctors. It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then the next day we did breakfast and lunch. And then she came to me and she says, we don't need to take any more food today. A bunch of pizzas arrived. And I said, what do you mean a bunch of pizzas arrived? So in 1 week prior to the explosion in West was the bombing at the marathon in Boston. And she said that the doctors at the hospital in Boston sent pizzas to the doctors at the hospital in Waco and with a note that said, hang in there. We know what you're going through. I said, we probably need to go back and thank those doctors in Boston. Let's just close the loop on it. And so we started working. I had the History Channel people behind me and we worked on it. And we ended up flying barbecue for about 300 people. At 5 in the morning, we were at the airport, DFW airport, and we flew to Boston and we fed 300 people lunch at the Boston Memorial Hospital. And that was really cool because we kind of closed the loop. So we thought. Fast forward a little bit, I'm in the throes of the History Channel tour, and we find out where the doctors got the idea to send the pizzas to the doctors in Waco. And somebody had sent pizzas to them with a note that says, hang in there. So I said, well, we need to find out who that was. And so with a team of people, we got digging, and it turned out to be a nurse at a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her name was Nurse Nancy. And so when we find that out, I'm going to be in Charlotte with the smoker on the history tour at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. We ended up bringing pizzas into her in Charlotte, North Carolina with some of her coworkers. And we just wanted to thank her for starting that whole loop. So now we think, we closed the loop. We're finished. The next day we invited her out to Charlotte Motor Speedway. We gave her sweet passes. She came out the truck and she was sitting up on the truck with me. I said, what made you want to send pizzas to Boston, to the hospital, the doctors? And she said, well, when I was a little girl, I'm from North Dakota, Grand Fork, North Dakota, and we had a flood. And she said, this truck came in here and this lady and fed everybody in that town, thousands of people. And she said, I never forgot about that. I had a hot meal in 2 weeks. I got goosebumps just telling you. And I looked at her and I said, you're kidding me, right? She said, no. I said, step back on this thing just a little bit. I said, look left and look right. I said, what would you say if I told you this is the same truck that came to Grand Fork, North Dakota and fed those people? She looked up at me with amazement and I wouldn't believe you. And so I told her the story and she kind of broke down a little bit. And so basically, when we were going to close the loop with feeding the doctors in Boston and then her at the hospital, the next day we find out we brought this thing all the way back home to 1997, and this is 2012 or 13, and we closed the loop. I'm sure you're asking why food. Food is a comforting thing. You know, you can really touch into people's emotions, and you feed them a quality meal, and how they feel about that meal is the feeling that we get when we serve it to them. So food has just always been, even at the Dude Ranch or on the smoker or on the smoker and the grill, when we're feeding people, it's kind of become my ministry. I like to feed people. With the smoker, we've been coast to coast a dozen times, and it affords us the ability to be able to be mobile and to move the product and be in different places. I was actually considered retiring it because I didn't really see any interest between either of my boys, but last summer we got fired up and did some stuff for the Big Ten football conference, and they really fell in love with it. For the first time, I thought, you know what? Let's keep it alive. Let's keep it rolling. And it also suits our foundation that we've created, H3 Foundation. My wife and I wanted to figure out a way that we could give back. That's the right thing to do, is to help people and to give back to the communities. And so we came up with the idea, instead of just donating money, why don't we create H3 Foundation with the truck, the Ultimate Smoker and Grill, being the basis, and we could use it to raise more money and help these causes out. We were both raised by single mothers, and there was times where it was tight in the winter time or summertime. You didn't have any money for this or have any money for that. So we really want to help if a single mother is tight on funds and she needs to pay electric bill, or she needs the gas in her car, or she needs some clothes for her kids, we're going to do things like that. H3 Foundation is Hilltop Helping Hands, hearts that give and hands that help. And so we're going to continue with our mission. Our boys are involved in it. It's a family operation, it's a family business, and it's a family charity. So we're going to kick on down the road and kick the tires and light the fires. We're smoking.